I stood in the line, unable to move, as the shadow beside me whispered, "Do you remember all the lies you told? The promises you broke? The secrets you thought no one would ever find out?" Then I saw it, the junction. Two paths stretched ahead, one narrow, steep, and lonely. The other wide, glowing, and full of people, but their screams, oh, their screams, still haunt me. When my turn came, the figure at the junction raised its hand and spoke, "Your sins are not forgotten. You must face judgment." And just like that, I was pulled into the first hall. There was no hiding. No excuses. My entire life played on a screen, every secret exposed. The voice thundered from above, "You were weighed, and you were found wanting." Now, let me ask you, if your life was shown on that screen right now, would you be ready to face what comes next?
Before we proceed into this gripping and life-changing story, take a moment to hit the like button, subscribe to this channel, and turn on the notification bell. This story is more than just words. It's a wake-up call. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And if you feel moved, leave a prayer or reflection in the comments below. Let's create a space where we can all reflect on what truly matters.
Have you ever wondered what happens the moment your heart stops beating? I used to think about it too, but never like this. I didn't just think about it. I lived it. I experienced something that changed me forever, and I can't keep it to myself. The first thing I remember is silence, complete silence. Then, a strange feeling like I was floating. My body was still there, trapped in that car wreck, but I wasn't. I was being pulled somewhere, fast. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't my imagination. I was living. As I looked around, everything felt strange and unfamiliar. The air was heavy, and the silence wasn't peaceful. It was terrifying. I could see others, countless others, ahead of me and behind me. We were all moving in the same direction, but no one was talking. Some had fear written all over their faces. Others looked defeated. Then, I heard it, a voice, clear as day. "Samuel, don't celebrate yet. You think you've made it. Not yet. Celebrate." Celebrate what? I didn't understand. I had spent years trying to do the right thing, live a good life, but something felt wrong. I felt exposed, like someone was watching me, and every mistake I'd ever made was on display. Let me ask you this, have you ever done something you thought no one would find out about? A lie you told, a promise you broke, something you took that wasn't yours. What if those moments never disappeared? What if they followed you, waiting for the right time to show up? As I moved forward in that line, it hit me, this was judgment. A shiver ran through me when I noticed the path splitting ahead. On one side, the road was narrow, winding, and dimly lit. On the other, it was wide and inviting, almost glowing. But something about the wide path didn't feel right. I could hear sounds coming from it. Screams. Cries for help. People shouting names no one was answering to. I wanted to turn and run, but there was no turning back. And then I saw it, a massive figure standing at the split. It wasn't human. It didn't speak, but I knew what it was there for. Its hollow eyes seemed to pierce through me. I felt small, powerless, and I couldn't look away. Before I could take another step, the voice came again. "This is just the beginning, Samuel. The real test is ahead. You don't think about these things when you're alive. You focus on your job, your friends, your family. You think there's plenty of time to make things right, to fix your mistakes. But what if there isn't? What if the clock runs out before you're ready? What if your life ended tonight? Would you be prepared?" As you sit there, watching this, you have something I didn't. You have time. You have choices. But let me tell you, that time is slipping away faster than you realize. This was only the beginning of what I saw. What came next is something I'll never forget. Do you feel that? That unease creeping in. Hold on to it. Because in the next part, I'll tell you what happened when the real test began. When the call came, and I had to face the truth about myself. Stay with me. The call to eternity. I remember the morning it happened, so clearly now, like it's frozen in my mind. I woke up restless. There was this strange heaviness in the air. I couldn't explain it, but it felt like something was about to happen. Then, the voice came again. This time, it wasn't soft or distant. It was direct, sharp, and impossible to ignore. Samuel, the time is near. Don't celebrate yet. You think you're ready. You're not. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to shake it off. It's just my imagination, I told myself. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. This was different. Have you ever felt that kind of warning before? A moment when something told you to pay attention, to take a closer look at your life. Maybe it was a gut feeling, a dream, or a passing thought that lingered longer than it should have. Did you listen, or did you push it aside? I thought I had time. I thought I could figure it out later. But that day, the voice wouldn't leave me alone. It followed me everywhere. Samuel, are you really prepared to meet your maker? The question hit me like a hammer. I'd spent years trying to live right, but suddenly, all my flaws came rushing to the surface. My anger, my pride, the lies I told myself to feel better, they all stood in front of me like ghosts. I remember sitting in my room, staring at the wall, trying to shake off the fear. But the fear wasn't the problem. It was the truth staring me in the face. Let me ask you something. If you stood before God right now, if your life ended this very moment, what would you say? Could you explain the choices you've made? Could you justify the things you've done in secret, the moments you thought no one saw? That day, I couldn't. And it terrified me. But instead of fixing it, I distracted myself. I told myself, I'm doing enough. God knows my heart. I'll deal with it later. Later. That's the lie we tell ourselves, isn't it? That there will always be more time. But time is a funny thing. It slips through your fingers faster than you think. As the hours passed, the unease grew stronger. Something was coming, but I didn't know what. And then the voice came one last time. Samuel, you've been warned. Prepare to meet your God. Prepare. Those words echoed in my head as I got into the car that night. I wish I'd taken them seriously. I wish I'd done more. But it was too late. And that's when it happened. The car. The crash. The silence. That was the moment everything changed. But before I tell you what happened next, I need you to ask yourself something. Are you prepared? Right now, in this moment, could you stand before God and say, I'm ready? If the answer isn't clear, you need to keep watching. Because what happened to me next might just be the warning you need. The accident, the doorway to the beyond. It started like any other trip. I got into my car, prayed briefly, and began the long drive home. The sky was dark, and the road stretched endlessly ahead, but something felt off. I couldn't shake the feeling. The voice echoed in my head. Samuel, be prepared. You are going to die. I laughed nervously, trying to ignore it. No, I whispered to myself, that can't be true. God, Please, not now. Have you ever felt like the world was closing in on you, even when everything around you seemed calm? That's how it felt. The calm wasn't comforting, it was suffocating. The road stretched on, and the car was filled with an eerie quiet. Even the sound of the tires against the asphalt felt distant. My heart raced. I could feel something coming, but I didn't know what. Then it happened. There was no warning. No time to think or react. The car jerked violently as if an invisible hand had grabbed it. A loud, piercing sound filled the air, followed by the unmistakable crunch of metal. The world turned upside down. I could feel the car spinning, flipping, crashing against the road like a toy thrown by a child. Glass shattered around me. My chest felt heavy, pinned down by something I couldn't see. Pain shot through my body, but then, nothing. Everything stopped. I remember the silence more than anything. No sounds. No movement. Just silence. And that's when I realized I wasn't in the car anymore. I saw myself lying there, trapped under the twisted metal, my body battered and lifeless. People were rushing around, their faces blurry and panicked, but their voices sounded far away, like a whisper carried by the wind. I tried to shout, to tell them I was okay, but no words came out. I wasn't okay. I wasn't there. Then, a pull. Like something was grabbing me, lifting me, pulling me away from my body. I wasn't floating. It felt more like I was being dragged, slowly but firmly. Have you ever tried to wake up from a bad dream and found yourself unable to move? That's what it felt like. I wanted to scream, to fight, but there was nothing I could do. The darkness surrounded me, thick and cold. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel the presence of others. I wasn't alone, but that didn't bring comfort. It brought fear. And then I heard it, the cries. Faint at first, like whispers in the distance, but they grew louder and closer. Voices screaming, pleading, begging for mercy. It was unlike anything I'd ever heard. I didn't know where I was going, but deep down, I knew I was heading to the place where those cries were coming from. Suddenly, the darkness lifted just enough for me to see a faint light ahead. It wasn't warm or inviting. It was harsh, like a searchlight in the middle of a cold, empty night. And in that light, I saw them, the others. They were lined up in a single file, stretching as far as the eye could see. Men, women, young, old. Some were dressed in rags, others in clothes that seemed out of place. But all of them looked terrified. The line. I was in the line. Have you ever been in a place where you knew you didn't belong but couldn't leave? That's what this was. I tried to step out, to move away, but my feet wouldn't budge. Something was holding me there. Something I couldn't see but could feel, like invisible chains wrapped around my body. Then, the whispers started again. Samuel, this is the beginning. You must face what's ahead. Ahead. I couldn't look ahead. I didn't want to see what was waiting. But the line kept moving, and so did I. That's where I stopped for now. Because what happened next is something you need to hear. I'll tell you about the line, the souls in it, and what awaited us at the end. I'll tell you about the shadows, the division, and the terror of knowing there was no turning back. But before I do, let me ask you, if you were in that line right now, what would you feel? Would you be ready? Or would fear grip you the way it gripped me? Stay with me. You need to know what comes next. The queue of souls. I didn't know how long I'd been standing there. Time didn't feel the same in that place. Seconds. Minutes. Hours. none of it mattered. What mattered was the line. The endless line of people moving forward, step by step, towards something I couldn't see. I stood there, trapped in my own silence, as the cries grew louder. They weren't random. Each one was filled with regret, desperation, and fear. The kind of fear that grips you from the inside, like a vice tightening around your chest. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. The people in front of me were like mirrors, reflecting pieces of my own life. I saw a man who looked calm, almost indifferent, as if he didn't care where the line was leading. Behind him was a woman sobbing uncontrollably, her hands covering her face. Then I saw a child. Barefoot, trembling, holding onto something invisible. My heart broke, but I couldn't move. Have you ever been in a crowd and felt completely alone? That's what this was. No one spoke, yet everyone's fear hung in the air, thick and suffocating. And then I heard it, the voice of the shadow. Son of man, you are heading to the junction of separation. The words were cold, final, and absolute. I turned to look for the source, but there was nothing there. Just the faint outline of a shadow walking beside me. At that moment, I realized something. The shadow wasn't following me, it was a part of me. It whispered to me, reminding me of everything I'd done wrong. Do you remember the lies you told? The promises you broke? The things you kept hidden, even from yourself? I wanted to scream, stop. But no sound came out. Let me ask you something, if all your secrets were laid bare, could you face them? Could you stand there, knowing that nothing was hidden anymore? That's what the shadow was doing to me. Every mistake, every sin, every failure played in my mind like a movie I couldn't pause. And then, I saw the junction ahead. It was massive, stretching out into two parts. On the left was the wide road, smooth and inviting, but it felt wrong. You could hear the cries from it, growing louder with every step. People rushed onto that path as if drawn to it, only to stumble and fall into darkness. On the right was the narrow path. It was steep, rocky, and barely wide enough for one person. No one was running to it. They moved slowly, carefully, as if afraid they might not make it. I turned to the shadow and whispered, "Where am I supposed to go?" The shadow didn't answer. It simply pointed forward, toward the figure standing at the junction. The figure was massive, towering over everyone in the line. Its face was hidden, but its presence was overwhelming. It didn't speak, but I knew why it was there. It was there to separate us. The line moved closer, and I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just a line of random souls. This was us. This was humanity, stripped of everything we used to hide. No titles, no possessions, no excuses, just our true selves. Have you ever thought about who you really are when no one is watching? When it's just you and your thoughts, your choices, your conscience. That's who you are in that line. And there's no pretending, no second chances. As I inched closer to the junction, the cries from the wide road became deafening. People were clawing at the ground, trying to turn back, but it was too late. Once you stepped onto that path, there was no escape. And then it was my turn. The figure looked at me, and for a moment, everything stopped. The shadow beside me spoke again. This is the moment you've been waiting for. The moment of truth. What will you do? I couldn't answer. My feet felt like they were glued to the ground. And then, the figure raised its hand, pointing toward the narrow path. Your sins are not forgotten, it said, its voice echoing like thunder. You must face judgment. What happened next, I wouldn't wish on anyone. The horse. The judgment. the truth laid bare for all to see. But before I tell you about that, let me ask you one last question. If you were standing at that junction, would you know which path you'd be sent to? Think about that as we move forward. Because the halls of judgment are waiting. And I have to tell you what I saw there. The halls of judgment. When I stepped off the line, I thought I would feel relief. I was wrong. The moment my feet touched the ground, I felt exposed. Vulnerable. Ahead of me stood a massive building with towering gates. The walls shimmered like gold but carried an unnatural heaviness. Above the entrance, there was an inscription. The halls of judgment, every secret shall be revealed. Those words hit me like a punch to the chest. Every secret. I wasn't ready for that. Are you? As the gates creaked open, I felt a pull, like an invisible hand guiding me inside. The air was thick, and the silence was deafening. Inside, there were rows of chambers, each marked with a name. I saw mine. It was etched into the door as if it had been there for eternity, Samuel's judgment. I froze. My legs wouldn't move. My shadow, still beside me, whispered, "This is where you will see the truth. Are you ready?" Before I could answer, the door swung open, and I was pulled inside. The room was blindingly bright, but the light wasn't comforting. It felt sharp, piercing into every corner of my soul. In the center of the room was a screen, larger than life, and in front of it stood a figure dressed in white. The figure didn't speak. It just stared at me, waiting. Then, the screen flickered on, and my life began to play. It started with my childhood. I saw myself as a young boy, innocent and carefree. But as the years rolled by, the innocence faded. The mistakes began to pile up. The lies. The anger. The moments I thought no one saw. Let me ask you something. If your life was played out on a screen for all to see, would you be proud of what they'd find? Or would you want to turn it off, hide it, erase it? I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. The screen showed everything, the good, the bad, the things I'd buried deep down, hoping to forget. Then, the voice came. Not from the figure, but from above. "Samuel, you were given chances to make things right. You were forgiven once, but you returned to your sins. Why?" I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. What could I say? That I thought I had time. That I thought my small sins didn't matter. The figure pointed to the screen, and it showed moments I had forgotten. Times when I hurt others with my words. Promises I didn't keep. Things I took that didn't belong to me. "You were weighed," the voice said. "And you were found wanting." Those words echoed in my head like a gavel slamming down in a courtroom. Let me ask you again, what if this was you? What if you were standing in that room right now, hearing those words? Would you be able to defend yourself? The figure raised its hand, and the screen went blank. For a moment, I thought it was over, but then another door opened, leading to another chamber. "You must proceed to the next hall," the voice said. I stepped forward, my legs shaking, my heart pounding. The hall stretched endlessly ahead, each one darker than the last. I entered the next room, and the words above the door made my blood run cold. The hall of restitution, what was taken must be returned. The memories flooded back. The times I borrowed and never gave back. The small things I thought didn't matter. The voice spoke again. "No thief will enter the kingdom of heaven." The screen flickered on again, showing me moments when I justified my actions, telling myself they were harmless. But they weren't harmless. They were weights, dragging me closer to the wide path I had seen before. "Have you returned what you owed?" Samuel, have you made peace with those you wrong? I couldn't answer. The doors opened again, pulling me to the next hall. Each hall revealed more of my life: unforgiveness, idle words, missed opportunities to help others. Every detail was accounted for. Every sin I thought was small, insignificant, came back like a flood. By the time I reached the final hall, I felt stripped bare. I was no longer Samuel, the man who thought he was good enough. I was just a soul, standing before judgment, with nothing to hide behind. Let me ask you something one last time. If you stood in those halls today, could you pass through? Or would you, like me, find yourself staring at your own failures, wondering why you didn't make things right when you had the chance? But this wasn't the end. The halls were only the beginning. What waited for me after judgment was something far worse, or far greater, depending on where you stood. Stay with me, because in the next part, I'll tell you what I saw when I left the halls. The place where souls are divided, and eternity begins. As I walked deeper into the halls, every step felt heavier, like the weight of my own soul was pulling me down. Each room I entered, each door I passed through, felt colder, darker. And with each turn, I felt like I was getting closer to something I couldn't escape. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream and beg for mercy. But there was no way out. The walls were closing in, and I was trapped in a place I never thought I'd be. In the first hall, the truth about my life was laid out in front of me like a film reel. The good, the bad, the moments I thought were hidden, every secret I ever kept was now on display. It felt like I was standing in front of everyone I'd ever known, and they could see every mistake, every flaw, every regret. Let me ask you this: if your life was shown on a screen like mine was, what would be shown? Would you be proud of what's there? Or would you feel the same way I did, like you wished you could hide, like you wished it could all disappear? The figure in white didn't say a word, but I knew. I knew that all the things I thought were small, those lies, those little selfish choices, were the things that mattered most. And the screen showed it all. I couldn't hide. I couldn't lie. It was just me and the truth. Then came the second hall. This one was darker. The light wasn't warm, but cold, like it was judging me, too. The doors opened, and there it was, the Hall of Restitution. A cold, harsh voice echoed from the walls. What was taken must be returned. I thought about all the times I took things I thought didn't matter. A few extra dollars here. A lie I never fixed there. Things I took, not thinking anyone would notice. But they did. It was all there in front of me. Every time I failed to make it right, every time I let something slip. Those little things weren't small, they were debts. Debts that followed me into that hall, waiting for me to pay them back. Have you ever taken something, even a little thing, and thought, it's no big deal? I'll make it right later. But later never comes, does it? The next hall was even worse. It was the Hall of Forgiveness. The walls seemed to close in as I entered, and I felt a deep ache in my chest. Did you forgive? The voice asked. It wasn't loud, but it was clear. It hit me right in the heart. I had to face all the grudges I'd held, all the forgiveness I refused to give. Every time I told myself, I'll forgive, but not yet, every time I let bitterness grow inside of me, there it was, staring me in the face. You see, forgiveness isn't just about them, it's about you. And I realized, in that moment, that the weight of my unforgiven heart was pulling me deeper into those halls. Let me ask you, is there anyone in your life you haven't truly forgiven yet? Because I promise you, holding on to anger doesn't just hurt them, it hurts you too. And finally, I entered the last hall. I didn't know it at the time, but this was the hall of works. Everything I'd done in my life, good or bad, was now measured. The good deeds I thought were enough, the moments when I helped others but still kept my selfish motives hidden, all of it was laid out in front of me. I thought my works would save me. But I quickly learned that it wasn't enough. "What did you do with your time?" the voice asked. "Did you do enough? Did you give everything? Or did you hold back?" I felt exposed, weak. I had always believed that good intentions would make up for the mistakes. But here, in that hall, my intentions didn't matter. What mattered was the real outcome of my life. When you stand before God, there will be no hiding. Every choice, every action will be judged. You won't be able to say, "I meant well." What will matter is whether or not you lived according to what you knew was right. As I left that hall, the doors closed behind me with a final thud. And I was left standing, waiting for what came next. But here's the thing, as terrifying as it all was, there was still hope. In the midst of all the judgment, I realized something: I still had a choice. The path wasn't fully decided yet. You might be asking yourself, what happens next? Where do we go from here? Stay with me. Because what I saw next, where I was led, changed everything. It's the moment when everything you've learned, every mistake, every choice, it all becomes real. And you'll see why this moment, right now, is the time to make things right before it's too late. Are you ready for the truth that lies ahead? Because the final chapter is just about to begin. As I stood there, staring at the closed doors, I couldn't help but wonder, what happens now? Was I really done? Was this the end of the line for me? Could I ever go back and make things right? But before I could answer myself, I was pulled again, this time, by a force that seemed stronger, more urgent. The room grew darker as I stepped forward, and the walls seemed to narrow, squeezing in on me. The doors opened with a creak, revealing a new chamber that felt colder than the last. This was the final stage. The place where everything comes together. But what I found there shook me to my core. The hall of eternity. The walls seemed to stretch infinitely, filled with mirrors. And in each mirror, I saw myself. Not the version of me I wanted to show the world, but the real me, the one behind the mask. Every decision, every regret, every lie I had told, every moment I had chosen selfishness over love. I wanted to look away, to run, but I couldn't. The mirrors were showing me everything, the truth, as raw and unforgiving as it was. And the most terrifying part, there was no one there to help me. No one to argue for me. It was just me and the consequences of my actions. Now, I know what you're thinking. What does this mean for me? Here's the thing, I thought I was a good person. I thought the things I did in secret didn't matter. But in that hall, I saw the truth. And I realized something. There is no hiding from who you really are. Have you ever thought you could get away with something, just this one time? Maybe no one would know, right? But let me tell you, someone always knows. And in the end, that someone is you, standing face to face with yourself. As I continued walking through the hall, I heard whispers. Soft voices. Some familiar, some not. I looked around, confused, but no one was there. The whispers grew louder, and then I realized they were voices from my past, from people I had hurt, people I had forgotten about. I heard the voice of a friend I had betrayed, a loved one I ignored, even strangers I had turned my back on. And each voice spoke one word: why? It was like a dagger to my heart. In that moment, I felt the weight of every choice I had made. Every time I took the easy way out, every time I ignored the truth, I could feel it. And the pain, the regret, it was unbearable. Let me ask you, if those voices were calling out to you, would you have an answer? Would you be able to explain why you chose the things you did? Or would you, like me, stand there in silence, wishing you could turn back time? I moved deeper into the hall, the whispers growing louder, but now there was a new sound. It was a sound I couldn't ignore. It was a heartbeat. A slow, rhythmic thump. It grew louder with each step I took, until I realized it was my own. My heart, beating. But it wasn't just the heartbeat of a person, it was the heartbeat of the universe itself. And with every beat, I felt something. A choice. A reminder, you still have time. In that moment, I realized something I hadn't before. As terrifying as the judgment was, as crushing as it felt to see everything laid bare, I still had a chance. A chance to change. A chance to do it right. You're probably wondering, can I really change? Can I go back and make things right? The answer is yes. You can. But it takes more than just feeling bad about the mistakes you've made. It takes action. It takes truth. And let me tell you, it starts now. Right now. The door at the end of the hall began to open. And as I walked through it, I knew there was no going back. But something else was clear too, the choices I made from here on out would shape my eternity. What choices are you making? Because if you don't start thinking about them now, you may find yourself facing the same door I did, only there may not be time to change. So let me ask you, what is stopping you from making it right today? What's holding you back from living the life you were meant to live? The one where you make choices that you can stand behind for eternity. Stay with me. Because the final chapter is about to reveal something you won't want to miss. The truth about where we go from here and how it all ends. As I stood there, in that cold, endless hall, I had one thought running through my mind, this is it. This is where it all ends. The door behind me slammed shut, sealing me in the place I feared most. And for the first time, I realized something I hadn't fully grasped before, there is no escaping judgment. There's no running from the truth, no avoiding the consequences of your choices. The weight of everything, the choices I made, the lives I impacted, the chances I took for granted, it all came crashing down on me. But in that moment, I also realized something else. I still had a choice. Let me ask you this, have you ever felt like you were stuck? Like you couldn't go back and fix things? That no matter how hard you tried, you were just too far gone? I felt that way. I felt like I was beyond saving. But here, in the deepest part of the halls, there was still a chance, a choice to make it right. And it wasn't just for me, it's for you, too. The voice came again, clearer now, with more authority. The choice is yours. The past is behind you. The future is ahead. But only one path leads to life. I stood there, staring at two doors. One was bright, shining like the sun, yet so far away it seemed unreachable. The other, dark and foreboding, seemed to call me with an unmistakable pull. I wanted to take the bright door. I wanted to run toward it, to escape the guilt, the shame, the weight of my sins. But something inside me held me back, and I realized the truth, the light isn't something you run to, it's something you walk toward, step by step, with humility and repentance. The darkness behind me seemed easier, but I knew better now. That path leads to despair, to regret, to eternal separation. And once you start walking that road, there's no turning back. I knew the right path. It was the hard one. It was the one that required me to face my fears, my guilt, my failures. But it was the path that led to hope, to peace, to forgiveness. As I walked toward the light, I could hear voices, laughter, whispers of joy. It was as though the whole universe was waiting for me to make the right choice. But that part wasn't about joy right away. It was about change. About owning up to who you are and who you could become. And here's the thing, I'm not special. If I can walk that path, so can you. The doors of judgment and the end, they are the beginning. The beginning of the rest of your eternity. Let me ask you, what path are you on right now? Is it the one that leads to truth, to life, to real change? Or are you still stuck in the darkness, telling yourself you have time, telling yourself you'll change tomorrow? Because I can tell you this, tomorrow isn't guaranteed. And what happened to me, it could happen to you. It's not a scare tactic, it's the truth. We all stand at that crossroads. And right now, as you listen to this, you have a choice. You can continue down the path of excuses, or you can face your truth and walk toward the light. Are you ready to make that choice? Will you continue waiting, or will you start changing now, before it's too late? If this story has stirred something in you, take a moment. What do you need to change today? Because the truth is, it's never too late until it is. And you don't want to be the one who waits until it's too late to make the right decision. So, what will it be for you? Will you walk into the light with courage, knowing you still have time to change? Or will you stand in the shadows, wondering what could have been? The choice is yours. The time is now.
You've heard the story. Now, the question is, what will you do with it? Don't just watch, act. Like this video if it stirred something in you. Subscribe for more stories that challenge and inspire, and share it with someone you care about. And in the comments, write a prayer, a commitment, or even a single word about what this story means to you. Let's lift each other up, because the time to prepare isn't tomorrow. It's now.